before I go into the city charter topic idea, I first need to mention the topic of sovereignty. If we read in the Bible, Genesis, we read that God created man out of the dust of the earth, and then He created woman out of man's ribs. Meaning God created all of us to be independent and sovereign. Meaning all of our natural rights, the freedom to live, the freedom to live our lives, the freedom to marry even, came from God, our Creator. Even in Genesis, it talks about the God-ordained marriage between man and woman, and then the commandment to procreate, leading into the very first form of governments, which is the family. And my apologies, I didn't really type up a speech. My mind's been filled with different ideas of which way to go. But since the beginning, government has always been, the devil has always been in the works with orchestrating man to be tyrants. We read about it in the Bible. We study it in history books. Especially is where I kind of want to start off with English common law, and where English common law came from originally because of tyrannical kings. You have King John, you have King Richard, and yes, the Robin Hood story, the very basic details of the Robin Hood story is a true story. And that, hence the main reason why the Magna Carta had to come forth. In order to establish proper governance, you have to first form a foundation. In the Magna Carta was that foundation in which kings have violated that. The Constitution itself adopted certain principles of the English common law, the Magna Carta, such as the right to a jury, writ of habeas corpus, trial by, so forth and so forth. The trial by jury is supposed to be by our peers. So the Constitution was properly designed to protect our religious liberty, such as our right to trial by jury, our rights. Fast forward 250 years, our rights are currently being violated. If we read the Declaration of Independence, every single abuse by the king, our current state, federal, and national government is violating those same rights. Well, what do? The Constitution is still valid. The state constitutions are still valid, but they choose to ignore those constitutions. So what do? Those a couple different terms out there. One is citizen grand juries, and that's for a different discussion, different time. But another idea is city charters, or otherwise known as city constitutions, which is basically a commission's form to draft a city constitution to coincide with the state and federal constitutions. Anything else that government does is null and void. The city has the right, the state has the right to nullify unconstitutional laws, court opinion, edicts, amend the executive orders. And I'm of the opinion the city has the same exact rights to do so as well. Hence, out in Tooele, the only chartered city in Utah, the state of Utah is trying to spend $100+ million to move the prison out there. They're having a tough time. Why? Because the city has a city charter. This last year, the state legislature, a Republican legislature, passed a bill that legalized same gender restrooms, locker rooms, dressing rooms, you name it. But if a city had a charter, we could choose to ignore that piece of legislation. Because what's law? Law is constitutions, not simple codes. Code is basically more of a corporate style of looking at things. That's why, off in Provo where I live, the city has a record of 1,500 on average property rights cases per year because they're seeking for revenue off the citizens. That's why the utility bill keeps going up and up and up, because they have the idea of generating revenue off the backs of the citizens. That's why we have property tax. Property tax is an immoral tax. I don't care what the discussion may be. It is immoral because it's taxing our property. And the whole purpose of of government, is to protect property. In the James Madison's National Gazette article in 1792, he states, our dollar, our money, our currency is property. Our speech is property. Our opinions, our thoughts, our creations is property. Our faith is property. And then he goes on to add that, that states the same thing. The purpose of government is to protect property. So, by establishing, this law within the city to protect property, we can rein in the out-of-control cities, which is using the police, which is using the courts, and other departments as revenue. We could vote on city marshals, and Sheriff Mack tomorrow is going to be doing a great presentation on constitutional sheriffs. But we could elect city marshals that have the same legal responsibility as a county sheriff to say, state of Utah, or whatever state you may be from, federal government, you're in violation of the federal constitution, you're in violation of the state constitution. This edict or code is null and void within our sovereign cities, because we are sovereign citizens that cede certain amount of power to the city charters to protect our liberty, and then we cede a little bit more to the county, a little bit to the state, a little bit to the nation, to protect our liberty. In fact, I'm of the opinion, the way that I want to kind of help draft a charter out in Provo is where we already have our neighborhoods divided, separated into individual neighborhoods. So what if we, organize an electoral college with the neighborhood chairs and vice chairs, which is elected by the people already that have zero legal authority, but allow them to be elected and allow them to have the electoral votes cast for mayor, and whoever the loser of the mayor race is become the deputy mayor. Electoral college works, but let's take care. Let's divide those, but let's also include the neighborhood blocks as well, so we don't set up a feudal system either. Feudal systems are evil. So let it be solely grassroots from the neighborhoods, from the homes to the blocks to the individual city neighborhoods, then to the city. We could reestablish writ of habeas corpus within the city under a city charter. Because in the USA Patriot Act that was passed in 2001, under Republicans, writ of habeas corpus went out the window. The purpose, now you might be asking, what is writ of habeas corpus? Writ of habeas corpus is a parchment of paper, legal paper where we can, if we're not getting a fair trial in this court, we can go to a more friendlier court where we can actually have a fair trial of our peers, so they can look at all the facts. So, because we're supposed to be innocent until proven guilty, not guilty until proven innocent. I want to reverse it back to the way it's supposed to be. Innocent until proven guilty, and that's the best way to do it. I'm of the opinion, in the city, at the city level, I'm also of the opinion that we should have 12 city councilmen being elected by the people at large in the appropriate districts, and then 6 city council being elected by electoral college based by the individual neighborhoods. So you have a check and balance. So you keep having checks and balances, not any one branch of government having complete power. So they all have to work together, yes, but not one of them gets abusive. They all check and balance each other. That's the whole point of constitutions, is to check your government. There may be some naysayers saying, oh, nullification's already settled, whatever the courts say is set in stone. No, let's look at the very case that the naysayers look at, Marbury versus Madison, that states, which proves our case, by the way, it is also not entirely unworthy of observation that in declaring what shall be the supreme law of the land, the Constitution itself is first mentioned, and not the laws of the United States generally, but those only which shall be made in pursuance of the Constitution have that rank. Thus, the particular phraseology of the Constitution of the United States confirms and strengthens the principle and supposed to be essential to all written constitutions, that a law repugnant to the Constitution is void, and that the courts as well as other departments are bound by that instrument. It's pretty cut and clear. If it's not there in either 3 documents, if the city has a city constitution, or if it's not there, or if it's the state level, if it's not in either 3 or 2 constitutions, we should not be doing it, period. And we have the right to nullify and deem it null and void. We have the legal right to do so. Now, what cities may have, so I mentioned Tooele City being the only city in Utah being chartered. What other cities outside of Utah? You have you do have far left cities, such as New York City and others, that have a city constitution, a city charter, which means ultimately the people are still the final check. If the people are ignorant, they don't deserve the freedom. They need to be actively engaged in the fight for freedom. But you also have other cities like Elko, Nevada, that's 20,000 people. You have San Bernardino, you have Milwaukee, you have some cities in Arizona that have city charters as well. And they do have the liberty of governing the city as to the way that they feel is best for that city. In Utah, I have the idea, since the state legislature denied Tesla from selling the cars here in the state of Utah, what if we had a city charter? We could have a sit-down conversation with them and not just say, yeah, come on in, insert your cars in our city and generate the retail tax dollars. Not just that. It takes jobs also to create those retail dollars. So let's sit down and negotiate with certain industries and say, look, we have a city constitution. We like to have you in the city. Come on out, bring your manufacturing, create thousands of jobs, which in turn produces millions of revenue. A city can be a light on the hill if we had this charter of liberties, and we could have multiple cities on the hill. If we had this idea, city charters take off like wildfire. In fact, with that being said, I am reminded of a vision that George Washington had, a threefold prophecy of the nation. In the final part of that prophecy, he saw multiple lights springing back up throughout the land. This liberty catching fire. Well, what are those lights throughout the land? Our city charters. People awakening to the idea, to the solution, instead of, let's push for this dictator, or let's push for this guy for president, or that guy for president. Let's not seek for kings. Let's seek for our liberty within ourselves. Let's figure out what we as individuals, as sovereign citizens, united as one, can do as together to bring forth liberty at the city, county, state levels, which then in turn the national will finally take notice. Not the other way around. Washington, D.C. will not be saved in Washington, D.C. It will be saved right here at home in our individual lives, in our families, cities, and counties, and states. I'm going to close early, but I want to close with my favorite quote by Edward Everett Hale. Bring it up real quick. And I quote, "I am only one, but I am one. I cannot do everything, but I can do something. And what I can do, I ought to do. And what I ought to do, by the grace of God, I shall do." Thank you for